Welcome to Maverick Mind, the podcast. If you are a creative soul, really ready to unlock your potential and design your path to freedom on your terms, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Ellie, designer, entrepreneur, yogi, and coach, and consider this your home to dive into the mindset, energy, and strategy to fast track your way to success. I'll also introduce you to some of the most creative, visionary, and maverick minds I know to share their insight, to feed your curiosity, and to inspire your next creation. I'm so happy you're here, so let's dive in. Hello, welcome back to the show. So great to start the week with you all as always, or whenever time you're listening to this. Great to have you here. Oh gosh, you guys, I recorded this week's episode a long time ago, a few months ago. And I have just sat here beaming, smiling so much as I'm editing it back. I cannot wait for you guys to hear this conversation. This is one of those that's a real gem. I cannot be more excited to introduce you to this week's guest. Her name is Lesie Kuny. Lesie has been in the dance world for 20 plus years as a dance teacher and choreographer. And through this conversation, we go into so many different things that I think you can transfer into pretty much any creative path, pretty much any medium that you're working with, pretty much any goal that you have, in the most lighthearted, warm, and insightful way. She shares so many little nuggets of gold that I really think that will stick with you. You know, I really think there's stuff that she says in this that I think you'll carry with you or listen back a few times. It's a goodie. So in this week's episode, we go into, of course, her journey through dance and kind of going down the route of choreographer instead of maybe pro dancer. The role safety, vulnerability, and play can have on unlocking somebody's authenticity, whether that's your own or whether you're working with somebody like she does in a dance teaching capacity. That's a really insightful kind of little riff she goes on there. Being the person of authority in the room and getting the most out of the people that you're working with. So that can be really helpful for you guys if you have things like bandmates, if you are a teacher yourself, or if you have a team that you work with in your creative studio or something like that. Again, her advice on that is just really, really, really counter to what a lot of people in authority would do. But I think her results really speak for themselves. So I think you'll find that really helpful. Stepping away from having to prove your worth and instead kind of deciding that you're worthy enough of being seen and navigating anxiety and depression on the creative path, and the power movement can have on unlocking your creative voice, shifting your creative energy, and really being something of merit to your creative process, unlocking your ideas through movement. So yeah, we go on many twists and turns. We have a lot of laughs and again, a lot of insightful moments, and I cannot wait to hear what you guys think of this one. As always, do let me know in my Instagram DMs at Maverick Mind Co, or you can also share your thoughts with Lesie too. Connect with her. I'll leave all her details in the show notes, of course, as always. So let's dive into it. I cannot wait to introduce you to Lesie Kuny. Okay, welcome, Lesie. I'm so excited to have you here on the Maverick Mind podcast. I'm really stoked to dive into all things dance, choreography, and using dance as kind of your creative tool. I think it's a really, well, from personal experience, because I used to dance, anybody watching this or listening to this probably does not know that. It's something I don't speak to very often, but I used to dance as a teenager, and it's still something that I really think is one of the most powerful tools that we have to unlock creativity, getting into the body. But I'd really love to know, to start off with, kind of your journey into dance.
Yeah.
You always danced from a young age, or was it something that...
Firstly, thank you so much for having me, Ellie. I'm really excited. Whenever I see an opportunity to talk about creativity, I'm like, let's go. Where's the sign up sheet? Get me into it. So I'm really and also really appreciative to everyone and anyone listening to this. So yeah, I basically I have always been a dancer. I started like many young people, like 3, ballet class, like, the baby ballerina, wave the scarf, cuteness. Um, and then it just kind of, I think, I don't remember it. I don't know. It just always fueled me. I always loved it. It was something that I really enjoyed, even when it was hard and even when it was, really emotionally racking. It was still somewhere that felt so good to me and a place where I could work out those feelings. So, yes, I started at like 3. And then I think by the time I was about 10, I quit ballet and only stuck with jazz, as many people do, because it's just more fun.
Absolutely.
Um, but then also realizing that I was like, oh, I'm missing out on a big chunk of very important information, and to realize that. So I had to kind of catch up so I could get with my peers. Because I'd probably taken like 4 to 5 years off, and really like what now as an educator, I'm like, oh my gosh, what a horrible time. Like I was really gonna ramp up like that. I don't know what kind of dancer I would have been. It's just such a pivotal time. Sort of that like 7 to 10-ish, 7 to 11. There's lots of growth there. And then I just stayed with it. I loved it. And when I got to grade 12, as many people do, I was kind of like, what's next? And I love dance and I didn't want to give it up. And there was no reason to give it up, um, which is something I still believe in. I think just because you graduate high school doesn't mean that we're done the journey or done the learning. I feel so deeply passionate about that. Um, but so I wanted to keep dancing. I didn't really know how to do that. And my parents were like, well, we'd like you to get a degree. And I was like, okay. So then I just tried to figure out how to do both of those, which I successfully did. I took a year of high school. I taught dance. So I was started my teaching journey when I was 17 years old, like straight out of high school. And thank you to Christy for hiring me, because I sounded older on the phone than I did when I came in for my interview. And I was like, thank you for taking
Oh
a
my God, I
chance on
love
me.
that.
Really appreciate it. I remember she told me when I came in, she was like, I was so scared because you were so young, but you sounded so professional on the phone. And I was like, well, I hope she's like, and I had nothing to worry about. I was like, whew, thank you. Because you need someone to take a chance on you when you're young. And then yeah, and then I went to university and I did a 2-year diploma program. And then I transferred to a university where my diploma transferred. And so yeah, I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts dance major, and then I've been teaching essentially since I was 17 years old, obviously with some gaps and some holes due to due to going to school. It's kind of hard to do both at the same time, but I did do both. And then yeah, so probably for like, I guess I graduated. Let's not say that out loud. So like, but I have been teaching for about 20 years, with a couple of gaps in there, a couple little gaps. So, and it's my space where I understand myself the most and I feel good. Yeah.
Do you still kind of specialize in jazz, or do you go into other mediums or other techniques?
Yeah, I would say I specialize in jazz, I think because I love it so much. But also, so most post-secondary programs either concentrate on ballet or contemporary slash modern. So that is also because I took like 4 intensive years of contemporary dance training. I should probably lead with like, I'm I'm a contemporary choreographer and teacher, which I am, but jazz is so just in my soul, like a part of who I am, whereas contemporary is something I've learned. Oh, I've never, sorry, I just had a real light bulb moment there where I really recognized. I was like, because it's a bit of a fight with myself because I do have this BFA and I'm very proud of it, but I don't always say that I'm a contemporary choreographer or teacher first because, like I say, the things that light me up from the inside, the things that have always resonated with me inside are like jazz, lyrical, and musical theater. Like those are innately within me that I want to bring out. Contemporary was something that I learned and now I share. I hope that um, feels clear. Maybe it doesn't, but
It definitely does to me. Yeah,
internal
I
internal
can,
versus external.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can fully resonate with that. And I think that creatives of all disciplines, like no matter what you guys are doing, whether it's painting, whether it's, you know, acting, whether it's singing, whether it's like my area is more design,
Yeah.
there will always be something that's really true to you,
Yeah.
and maybe something that you have to do uh, for other reasons. Maybe it's because you learned it at school, maybe
Yeah.
because it's your side hustle, maybe it's the other thing that brings the money in or something like that. But
Yeah.
there will always be the something that really fires up your soul,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that I think that, you know, we're meant to do, I think.
Yeah. And it's not to like say that I don't enjoy the other things or I'm not good at them. I think they actually, I think this goes for all creatives, all the branches that you like dabble in inform the other ones and like strengthen the other like mediums that you work in or the other, like it all works together cohesively. So I never like, I let my musical theater love influence my contemporary dance like a lot. And then some people see those numbers and they're like, well, that's not contemporary. And I'm like, I disagree because I have the degree, but let's talk about it. You know what I mean? So I let those things influence. And I think that's where the excitement and even more creativity can come when you kind of like use those other genres to influence each other.
Absolutely, I definitely agree with that. It's like we kind of have this ecosystem of things that we have
Yeah.
all growing the same tree, but like you have that everything influences each other, and it can kind of, as you say, feed into one another. And I think that's how we get innovation, and that's how we get like maybe fresh ideas. And I'm sure
Yes.
you maybe see it within the dance world. I remember when I used to dance, that kind of there would be a season where everyone was kind of doing the same thing,
Oh man.
especially if
Yeah.
you do competitions anyway.
Yes. Yes.
Everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's kind of got the same hairstyle, same makeup trends, or like same
Yeah.
outfits, or there'll be
Yeah.
one move that everyone's doing, and then
Yeah.
out of nowhere there'll be a new trend that comes. And I think that really comes from like a really innovative teacher or choreographer, or
Yeah.
seeing something from way outside of that field and bringing it
Mm-hmm.
into what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean
That
that.
is funny how I never I think because I'm always like, oh, dance like in performing art, but you're right, there are trends and they go across like all the mediums because it's true. Like you look back and you go, oh, this was dance in the 2010s, and especially because we have like it documented on television now. It's like, and I also will say that I think that having performing arts on television, like as reality TV, to like give out to people, has also really influenced um, competitive dance in both positive and maybe not so positive ways. I think it's gone. I think both are true.
Wow, that's so interesting. I've never thought of that. Like, how do you
Yeah.
think it has influence?
Oh, now, ooh, spicy. I'm just gonna say this is spicy, and you can disagree with me, people in the comments. I think, I think it has really broadened what people consider contemporary. Um, and personally, I feel like it's watered down the genre, and we have people who see it and connect with it again in their soul, but maybe don't have the language, don't have the information to truly make something within those guidelines and boundaries. But again, that's also like pushed innovation, but it has really shifted the culture. Um, and it's tricky to find the balance. It's like, you know, do you label this as, it's the same with like any, like I'm just thinking back to like, you know, like things like design trends where you go, you can really nail something to like rococo or like art nouveau like, you know what I mean? We have these like styles, and then you have something that is like, well, it kind of looks like that, but like I know what that aesthetic is supposed to be, and this doesn't quite fit. And how do we, not how do we accept it, but like where does this live, kind of thing. So I've really seen reality dance television. It's also really pushed the athleticism, which I think is great. And then also the other side of that coin is has pushed the amount of tricks and like showiness as opposed to the artistry. And so now every kid needs to do an aerial. And like if you don't have an aerial, like you're not. And I'm like, but very few Broadway shows require you to do an aerial. So like where do you want to fall in what you want to do? Like so it's just there's lots again like the influence um yeah can come from everywhere and there's two sides to every coin.
That's so interesting. But it must be really challenging too for you as a choreographer because you're trying to choreograph things that are really true, but then there is like those trends where things are like perhaps a bit more showy and maybe feel a little bit less authentic to you.
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
balance that?
It's tricky. It's tricky. And there's a lot of discussion, I would say, in the culture right now where a lot of people who have power are saying, you don't need tricks or you don't need this. Like, and I'm like, okay, cool. But like, let's stop rewarding those dances then. Like, we have the power to like, that's where I kind of like get up on my little soapbox and I'm like, no. um, so the balance is like, it's a lot because you want the students to be successful because you want them to feel successful. So part of you feels like you have to play the game, and I think that is maybe one of the biggest like bits of being a creative in like any industry is it's like whatever your the game is that you recognize as part of your business, right? So for competitive dance, I'm like, well, it's got to be competitive. If I put a 15-year-old jazz solo up next to another 15-year-old jazz solo from like Studio X, where do I fall, you know? And then at the same time being like, what is going to serve this human being in general? Because they are a 15-year-old. They're not a professional. They're not in a company. We're doing this as a youth activity. So like, what is the best for this child to ensure that they stay safe and healthy, um, physically and emotionally, top notch for me. And what are the things that that student really um, like is sparkly about them? I want to show everybody that because I have had kids. Everybody knows this. You meet somebody who's so charismatic, whether you're like at a party or you see a performer on stage, and you're just like sucked into them right away. That's that special sauce. And I always try to bring, for me, I'm like, now that I adjudicate, I've started that in the last sort of 5 years. I'm like, oh man, a charismatic person on stage who's like loving what they do, you're already ahead. You've already got your audience. So then, you know, personally, I'm like, I don't need that aerial. Like, or like, this is such a beautiful artistic piece, and then you have a horrible turn section, and I was just like, I wish you didn't feel that pressure to have to like do that thing because everything was so good. Yeah, it's a balance, and also recognizing that like that family you're choreographing on, especially for solos, is a client. They are paying you for a service. So like you are an artist for hire, very much so in the like, you know, when you would have a patron and you were, you know, a painter, that sort of thing. I don't know how many choreographers feel that way. I do. And I think it's the reality. I think to say like I'm in charge and I'm the choreographer and we're gonna do what I want to do. I'm like, yo, they're paying you for a service. There's a back and forth and there's a give and take and yeah. So it can be tricky. There's a lot of elements at play in
Oh,
that
for
situation.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think when you're creating any business period, like whatever you're doing, there's always going to be a fine line and a bit of a dance between
Yes.
authenticity and playing the game.
Yeah.
I kind of want to dive into that secret sauce, like that little, some call X factor, some call
Yeah.
like little spark that people have, because I think that that can be found no matter what your discipline is,
Yeah.
whatever kind of art you're doing. That I really find personally, I can see when any creative is sharing their authentic self from a mile off.
Yeah.
And I can see where somebody is shoulding, like, like shoulding, like, I should put in this really fancy move because everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
Not because I want to, but because I feel like if I do, people will score me higher. If I
Yeah.
do, it's impressive for everyone else.
Yeah.
And you can almost see when somebody feels that element of should, because like there's something in their energy dips a little bit. I
Yeah.
don't know what it is. So again, there's like a fine line between finding and showing that authenticity and maybe having to go with the shoulds sometimes. But as a teacher as well and a choreographer, are there any things that you do to like help really bring out that authenticity within somebody?
Yeah. Well, I said that so confidently,
I
which is
love
a
that.
bit false. Um, so one, I think uh me being my most authentic self is really important. I don't talk up here. Hi, welcome to class. That's not sustainable and that's not who I am. Um, Even with littles, I can still have a kind voice, but I think like really resonating and like this is how I talk to you and I'm going to be goofy and I'm going to be sarcastic from the jump. That's the space. It's just we're but just a bunch of meat bags moving around. Like let's not take things quite so seriously. Um so that a lot of self-deprecating humor to make, especially because I work with like a lot of preteens and teens, so basically like 11 and up is kind of my sweet spot. Um to let them know that I'm like, oh, it's safe to be dumb here. It's safe to be goofy. And I also work very hard to ensure that the studio space is safe. So it is, it's a lab. There is no perfection needed. I'm actually 100% uninterested in it uh, in the studio and probably ever because it's impossible. But the more students can feel like they're in a lab and we're learning and we're growing and we're experimenting, and that's encouraged and said out loud and given permission to fail, that is like, okay, like this is where I put in the work, this is where I figure it out. And when students feel safe in that environment, they trust you because you've built this space, and then within that trust they're like, oh, I can be me and no one's going to turn away. I can dig into like the thing that is me and I will be celebrated for it. And like I see that in my students. It makes me like so happy. And we have like such, I was just saying to my class last night, I was like, you're my favorite collection of weirdos. We're just like a whole big crew. I was like, she's like, I always joke that I'm like, why do I always get the weirdest kids? And then I was like, because of the energy I'm putting out. Like the weirdos come to the weirdos. Um, but I love it. I'm like, bring the weirdos to me. I'm here. I'm here for the kids who are like, can I wear a bald cap? Yes. So on board with that. Like,
Go for it. When is there
right,
not an occasion for that?
right. Like I'm like, we were sailors last year, and like, and that's the thing. And as that trust is built, that's like that was exactly that moment of I kind of let the kids create their own characters. We did a musical theater piece from South Pacific. So they were all sailors. And I was like, you can't all look the same. We're all different characters. And who are we? And they got so into it. And, they started asking questions of like, can my character be bald? Can I wear a bald cap? Like, what if my sailor has like a sleeve of tats? And I was like, yes. Because that is the part where I'm like, yes, I could choreograph that. I could tell you your character's this and da 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 da. But it's not, again, it's not coming from their inside. And so it's placed on top of them instead of coming from the inside out. And like you say, you can see that. So, but it's safety and trust creating that space. It and then you don't have to pull the secret sauce out from the kids. They can't wait to share it. And I shouldn't just say kids. I think that goes for everybody. When you are seen and feel safe and you build trust with someone, that's when you're like freak flags, like, hello, wave it.
Absolutely, I can totally see that, and that kind of reminds me of like when I was doing dance at around that age. Well, I think I can't remember how old. Between around 11 and 17,
Yeah.
I did competitive
Yeah.
dance, and I really put a lot of my confidence now and a lot of my ability to fall down and get back up again to that time in my life because I think that when you're given that license to play and just like be silly,
Yeah.
and that well, my teacher was quite like, we'll have fun, but then she was also no bullshit sometimes, which is really
Yeah.
good to be. And I
Yeah.
think it really does draw out that kind of different sides of you, because you get to play different characters and
Yeah.
express different emotions and process different emotions in different ways, but in a really safe space where it's like there is no wrong here.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's only like, let's just see what happens, kind
Yeah.
of.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's an experiment. And like, it's so funny you say play because, and again, too, like when you're in a competitive field or, you're working towards perfection in whatever, sort of creative medium you're working in, if you lose that sense of play and vulnerability, everything gets really stagnant. And then it's like, but I've got to create, I've got to perform, like I've got to strive to hit this thing. And I'm like, ooh, that just sucks the soul out right away. And so you see the technical proficiency and you're like, holy smokes. But you're like, where is the heart? Where's the soul? Like, I awesome, and it's still missing a piece. So yeah, again, yeah, making sure that there's room for play and improv. That's something I do with my kids all the time. And I'm like, there's no wrong moves. If you fall, cool. How are you going to transition that into a next movement? Like, where is that? It's all in that transition of like, you didn't fall. You chose to submit to gravity and then you rolled.
Exactly.
Spin
How
it,
can you
spin
how
it.
can you finesse that fall?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. Getting
Yeah,
out of the brain.
absolutely. Yeah, and I was just thinking as you were saying that, like, there's so many ways, like, for the listeners, if you're different disciplines to dance, or even if you are a dancer, like, how can you bring a little bit of that container back
Yeah,
into the way that you create? Whether
yeah,
that is in an actual studio that you have, that you go to create, or whether that's just a kitchen table that you use to create.
yeah,
How can you bring a little bit of that feeling into whatever that space may be? How can you express what's within instead of take what's coming out of you onto the paper? How can you
yeah,
infuse that play? How can you have kind of, it's not like no rules, but there's no right or wrong here.
yeah. And I think that is tricky. I am lucky in that every class kind of feels like a workshop. Like, even though in my head there is a quote unquote end goal, whatever that might be, creating a number, finishing the season, I think by facing the task, my hamster is like running in molasses. I think by facing the task on a very small scale and just focusing in on like what's right in front of you as opposed to that big picture. I think when we start zooming out too far in terms of like catastrophizing of like I have to get this done or what have you, I think that's where we lose that bit because you're just like it's a different thought process. Whereas if you're just like I've got this hour, what am I going to do with this hour? That's it. There's nothing beyond that hour. So in a weird way, by putting a constraint on yourself in terms of like just focusing in on, and like that could be, I don't know, like if you're writing music or designing something or painting something, you're like, give yourself a little frame, a little scaffolding, and be like, what can I create in this right now without thinking about big old goal? Because you will get there. You know that it's there. We don't need to like harp on it for ourselves. Let's not. So so like just I really find that like especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm like, yo, I've got 45 minutes or an hour. Okay, don't waste it thinking about what's gonna like that's a waste of my time. Like just focus in and it just helps you just accomplish the task. And just by doing and moving, and like going through the motions, you never know. And I feel like, I don't know, I hope somebody else feels this way too. um, the days where I feel the least creative, sometimes the best stuff happens because,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, it's not fun. It's not, those aren't the moments of like fun creation where I'm like feeling hot, but you can look back and you go, man, I remember that day. I was not feeling it. And I created this thing that I'm like, there are things I'm like, I don't recognize. Did I make that? Because it doesn't feel like me, because that was a day where the box got expanded and pushed out against the outsides. So I think just focus in, just give yourself a little scaffolding, and be like,
Yeah.
instead of thinking long term, just focus on what's right in front of you, and then that will be more. It's more fun. You're like, just great. It's an hour, and then it's done. It's done.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. 'Cause I think a lot of creatives suffer from overwhelm a lot.
Hi,
Yeah, hi, my name's Ali,
like
been there.
like I think I'm secretary of that club.
Yeah, exactly. Myself and overwhelm know each other very well. Um, but yes, I think to give yourself sometimes there's like a balance again of like um, when we have a playground and we're a child, there's a fence around it, right? And creativity relies on curiosity and play, but again, when you put
Mhm.
that fence around it,
Yeah.
sometimes it makes it more creative, but we think
Yes.
that it would make it less, but I
Yeah.
don't think it does at all. Well, not for me
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Something I'd really love to know about, like your personal creative process, because I can imagine, or like just thinking back to my dance teacher, I remember wondering like how the hell she choreographs for like each individual solo person all the time, and like you go to the next private lesson and she can actually remember your routine when I couldn't remember it.
Yeah.
Remember, like I didn't know what I was doing. So I'd really love to know like when you have maybe a bit of pressure to choreograph many different things, whether that's for a
Yeah.
show or whether that's multiple different solos at once, is there like tools or tricks that you use to feel creative in every step of the way, or are there kind of patterns that you use to make it easier?
No, no, I just um so it's so funny because I do feel like this last season, like I'm just finishing my season now, and I probably had the most choreography I've maybe ever had in a season. Um and a lot of solos and duos, like a lot. Thankfully, having different genres is great. So it's not like I'm doing 16 jazz solos. That I feel like would be daunting. That being said, I do a lot of musical theater slash stage. And that can be tricky because I'm like, oh my gosh, one, I do not want to do something that everybody's done before. I think that's a driving factor for me in my creativity is I'm like, what haven't people seen? What can I I do love bringing new things out. I do love being the first person to like do the thing. Um, Even if it's not well received, which is so unfortunate because then like I have seen, and I think every creative has done this, where you're like, this niche thing that I'm like really into, I'm gonna like put it out there. And then next season it's everywhere, and you're like, what? Huh? And you're just like, cool, really glad everyone's getting it, but like, could I have my little like moment? And it happens everywhere. And but I'm mostly just excited that like more people are seeing the weird thing. Um, so music also for me is huge, 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 huge. The variety of music that I get to use and the fact that like every kid has a different song. I am very musically inclined. Um, I sing and I used to play piano. I dabble now, but it's horrific. Um, so music is really innate in me, and that really fuels how I choreograph. So I I can't, even if it's the same movement, maybe in a different order, but to a different song that has a different rhythm and a different syncopation, it will not be the same. Um, and actually, I just choreographed last season. I used a song I had used before, and it had been a jazz trio, and then the students I had chose it for a jazz duo, and I was like, oh shit, what do I do? Because in my brain, I was like, it is this dance and it was called the Church Ladies, and it was like it's kind of like a gospely song, and it's like it's so jazzy, and they came out in like moo they were like old church ladies, and then they kind of turn away from the audience and they have these tearaway dresses, and then there's showgirls underneath, and they're just like bringing it to church or taking everybody to church. And then I was like, oh, these kids picked this same song out of like the options I gave. How do I not just recreate the same thing? And it was such a good practice and challenge. And actually, I have to give credit to the dancers because I was like, I want to be really clear with you guys. Like I said to them, I was like, I'm struggling to get out of the theme that I had for this dance already. So we need a different theme. And the senior dancer went, well, what if I'm like trying to convince the song has the word like happy in it a lot of times. And so the senior dancer went, well, what if I'm trying to convince Ellie to like get happy, get excited? I was like, oh, it was just that spark. And I was like, I'm off to the races. Let's go. Like, I've got it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, so music, different genres, collaboration. Collaboration sparks for me. Um, Watching what people can do, asking what people can do, checking in with them. What resonates with you? How are you hearing this song? Like, what are you, let's not only to be inspired, but also like to get on the same page, right? Like, because again, for me in my creative process, especially in solos and duos, it's not about me. It's just not. It's about them. They're the ones going on stage. Their moms and dads are paying for it. In the group dance is a little bit different. I'm like, no, 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 I got this idea. And again, that normally comes from music, I would say. So that's where I get like, I'll hear a song and I'm like, this has been in my back pocket for like 10 years and I finally have the group to do it. That's happened a lot. So I just, yeah, music and collaboration are like huge ways that I keep that creativity moving.
Amazing. Yeah. And I guess, like, as you said, a little bit of collaboration and also admitting sometimes if you're stuck and you're the choreographer, I think it's quite powerful because, again, you showing your humanness allows them to show their humanness.
Yeah.
So then they can maybe be a bit more vulnerable with you and or honest with you and say, you know what, actually this song really makes me feel like, I don't know, maybe it reminds me of this time that was actually quite hard in my life and I quite like to express that through what I'm creating. But
Yeah.
that you give them, especially if you're working with people younger than you or
Oh, yeah.
teenagers specifically, um, like you, like the person in the authority kind of being open and giving them permission to do the same, I think will
Yeah.
provide a lot of freedom in terms of the what you're actually creating in that moment, the routine that
Hmm.
you're creating, but also that's something when it's exercised in a safe space like in a dance studio or in an art studio or somewhere like that, um, that then that kid or that person will start to feel safer being vulnerable elsewhere as well.
Yeah.
So it's a really powerful relationship that you build. And I think that that's a really special and I don't think always so common way to be as a choreographer or as that person in authority because often you kind of it's a little bit ego driven of like I have this vision and I think you want to be doing this instead of let's do this together, what feels
Yeah.
right for you.
Yeah. I think that really comes from having gone to post-secondary training um, in concert dance and also again spicy thought. I think it comes with experience and practice. Like I say, like I I feel the need to prove myself to people less now. Part of that is because I'm like, hello, like look at the success. We don't look at the track record. I don't if you don't see the value that I bring, best of luck to you. I wish you the best. But I find with and I think again, it's just life design. It's not it has nothing to do with like creativity, but the young when you're younger and you're trying to build that portfolio. Um you know, you're like my creative ideas and like let me show the world what I've got and it's ego and you want to prove yourself. And now I feel like I don't need to again, also because I have put in the work and I have been working like this, I would say for a solid decade where it is collaborative and I am like it to ignore the people you're working with that you're literally building something on is wild to me. like so I've always felt that collaborative drive and if I may be so bold in my confidence, the kids I've worked with particularly in the last 4 years where I've really been been able to like drill down and be like, this is who I am, this is how I work. I will say I've never, me personally as a choreographer and educator, I have never been more successful, like award wise, recognition wise, as I have in the last 4 years, where I have been the most authentic, the most vulnerable, and the most collaborative with the students I work with. And those kids have been wildly successful in ways that they have never been before either. And I was like, this is why it works. I'm not saying, ooh, look at me, look at my awards, but I'm like, look at what I'm doing and the results that are happening because of what I'm doing. And it's so nice to see that it works. It works.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think
Yeah.
they do kind of speak for themselves, but it's
Yeah.
like a bit of trust, I think. I mean,
Big
the
time.
trust I think comes from like the years before, maybe
Yes,
where you
it
weren't
does.
doing so like that, and also really trusting your talent and your abilities to teach
Yeah.
and facilitate and choreograph and things like that. I'd really love to know because you seem like, obviously I haven't watched you choreograph, but you seem like a very natural teacher, like
Ooh,
somebody that's
yeah.
like really born to do that. So I'd love to know, like, was there ever a time that maybe you wanted to go? Was there like a crossroads where you wanted to go in the professional dance route or choreography, or was it always
Hmm.
choreography?
I still don't feel like choreographer is like the right. Uh, uh, I still feel uncomfortable with that label. I think because I primarily view myself as an educator, like that. So that's really kind that you like see that, and like even just by me talking about it. Um, I have always, I joke, I was like, I was a bossy little gal. Like, I like to be the leader. I like to be in charge. When you watch my recitals, I am the like 3 year old who knows what's going on. Like, I am the one kid who's like doing things at the right time. So that is just a bit of my personality, for sure. And I've always just wanted to do it. I started assistant teaching when I was like 12. So being in that leadership, I think because I had such a strong role model and mentor in my teacher, I just absolutely adore. And I so looked up to her. And I was like, if I could, and I still feel this way, I should say, it's not like it's gone away. How I felt about this woman was so powerful. And when I realized that I could have that impact in someone else's life, I was like, oh, that's massive. That's massive for me to be able to do that. And so I think that's why the education part always felt so much stronger. Um, was like, I don't want to just make a dance, like come in, choreograph and be like, peace, guys, best of luck. Like, I'm like, no, 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 let's walk through it together. I figured it out. So, like, let me help you figure it out. Like, I'm going to be here to support you as you figure it out. Um, I did want to be a professional dancer. Um, that was sort of my hope when I went into university. I didn't I didn't receive and or feel the encouragement and support to follow a professional career that I felt like I needed. I had very low self-esteem, very minimal confidence in myself and myself as a dancer. And because that wasn't reinforced by the people around me, I felt that a professional performance career was not an option for me, which is very sad because now I look back and I'm like, no, I literally just needed someone in my corner saying, go to that audition. You can do it. So now I'm that person for the kids. Like, I'm like, no, no, no.
Mm.
Everyone in the room, all trained. You don't know what that director's looking for. Go to the audition because you can do it. Absolutely not. So I did. I mean, real talk, I joke all the time that I would still love to be a professional dancer, but the one job I want is to be a backup dancer for Justin Timberlake.
Oh my god, who wouldn't?
That is like the dream job. I'm sorry. Like, I love my kids so much. They also know. They're like, oh, she would abandon us for Justin Timberlake in a heartbeat. And I think they'd be really excited for me. I like to think that they'd be like, yes, Leslie. But yeah, no, education, it was just like, I kind of feel like I fell a little bit backwards into teaching, but I again, I saw the power that being a dance educator had because it was so powerful for me. And even though I know I'm that person, I I don't feel it in my soul. I know I have impacted so many people and so many people's lives in the way that like Megan, my mentor and friend, did for me. But it's crazy for me to really internalize like, oh no, I'm that to somebody else. Like, but I try not to think about it too much because I can't. It makes me too emotional.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. No, I totally resonate with that because like outside of doing creative coaching and stuff, I've also been a yoga teacher for the last 12 years.
Oh, love
And
it.
like I find it really weird when someone comes up to me and says like, "Oh, like your yoga classes have like changed my life or your meditations have changed." I'm always like, "Me?"
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
This is
That's
just
that
sort
imposter
of
syndrome where you're like, me, this human piece pile of trash? What are you talking about?
yeah, but I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing. It's like I think it's kind of the right way to be because it that fuels you to put your ego aside and I guess be the
Yes.
kind of teacher that you are.
Yeah.
But also it fuels you to keep looking for ways to be better, I
Yes.
think.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I like that's so funny. I fell in love with yoga like I started practicing it after I really started training and I was like, "Oh, this is life-changing. There's no mirrors." And like just like it was great. Um but yeah, I think too like are you teaching for the people in the room who are taking the class or are you teaching because you're trying to like prove something to yourself? Like, are you teaching for you in terms of like your ego? Like, I'm teaching for me in that it like fills my cup. Like, I love it. I'm not teaching because my ego needs a boost and I want to be in charge of all these kids and I want to, or people, it can, we see it like, any type of instruction, like, because we've all been in a class where we're like, yo, read the room. No, like, that's not happening. Like, this group of people, and you're like, cool. So this class was for you. I don't want to come back. And so, yeah, it is powerful, but only when you step out of your ego in that leadership space and you're like, no, no, no. I'm teaching to for the people in the room, not for my ego or my self.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that idea transfers really well to like any kind of creative
Yes. Yes.
space. Like I think are you just doing it for the validation? Are you just doing it to appear like some really important artist? Or are
Yeah.
you doing it because it's really your soul's work?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's kind of a journey to answer that question, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And there's little like side paths that you'll take, right? Like there is the
Absolutely.
road and then you're like, just kidding, I'm gonna go. And like I will say, like, and some of them are they're not detours, they're part of gathering more information to be better in that like road. Like for myself, like a choreographing comes with the territory. And I joke that I never felt like a very good choreographer. Um, I don't think that's true anymore, but I don't. It doesn't feel like my wheelhouse. Um, and then yeah, like I say, these side things that you get involved in just help strengthen the core purpose. So never to like look at those little detours as like bad things.
Absolutely. I think like any creative path, it'd be weird if it was just like one direct
Yes.
route and you're
Yes.
always doing that one road, that
I
one like
think that might
highway
be
to
impossible in like a
yeah,
creative life.
I think by nature we're kind of all magpies. We're all
Yeah.
curious beings and you want to explore this avenue or like
Yeah.
I'm all of a sudden super into this and I need to get like dive all the way into that and kind of get a bit
Hmm.
obsessive and weird about it for a while, but then it
Right.
will influence what either
Yeah.
I come back to, whether that
Yeah.
is for you like jazz dance or whether it's for someone else sculpture or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
um Trust, I think, those intuitive nudges to the right sometimes,
Yeah.
and you'll come back
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah. That's tricky too. Like if you like, I don't know. It is weird because I struggle with black and white thinking a lot. So it's tricky for me when I get on a side road to not just totally like meltdown and be like, I'll never, I'll never come back, or like my life has totally changed. Who am I if I'm, and you're just like, calm down. You're just taking a little detour. But yeah, staying curious is one of my not new. I'm just internalizing it more, and I think it helps in like being a human and being an artist, like transforming that like frustration or anger or any of those like quote unquote negative emotions. I just try to turn into curiosity. It- it's not always easy, but it's really beneficial, and you get more information. And I always feel like the more information and the more tools we have, the better we are literally equipped to do anything. So like everything's feedback, everything's tools, like how we filter them and then how we choose to use them, which I think is like very important.
Absolutely. And I think that's really interesting that you like intuitively meet your like thoughts or perhaps unwanted emotions in that way, because I think a lot of us push them away. I know anxiety and depression are like super big within creative communities. We're
Mm-hmm.
statistically actually more likely to experience either or both. And I think having that simple tool, something I learned in meditation, but you can do it without meditating, is getting curious about your
Yeah.
emotions rather than forcing them away.
Yeah.
You can turn your mess into your message or your
Yeah.
like.
Oh, yeah. 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 It's not I'm I am not great at it. It is something that I actively work on to be curious. Um to move me out of the extremes, because I will say like I identify as someone um who has dealt with and does still deal with anxiety and depressive um episodes, spaces. um so trying not to swing so far from like one side to the other, right? Like it's really like really big swings. So when it goes in that negative space of the big swing, to then just feel it and then transmute it and be like, get curious, like why is it feeling that way, or like why is that the thought process. um yeah, it's
Well,
not
sometimes,
it.
sometimes what does it have to tell me?
Yes, yeah,
What
yeah.
do I have to learn from this? And I
Mm-hmm.
find often, not always, but often working with creatives when they're in specifically anxiety, maybe actually no, depression too, it's often because part of them is not being heard. They're like not expressing something authentically.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
may be following the shoulds a bit too much or too afraid to share something because it's too vulnerable. Um, or they've been creating work again that isn't really who they are for a while, and you can only
Yeah,
wear that mask so long, I
yeah,
find.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah,
but I
yeah. You
think
can't. Yeah, to live in that space of like is like you say, you can't wear that mask for very long. It really wears on you, and then just personally, the longer you like exist in that space, resentment builds up
oh for sure,
quickly. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, and then that resentment can like really ferment quite quickly.
Yeah.
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 Um, but I think tools like if somebody is perhaps resistant to doing something like journaling or therapy or coaching or something, I really think that dance is an incredible way to process your emotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It, it yeah, I didn't it's so funny because like I joke like I am of an age like I was dancing in the like late 90s. And I would remember, also highly emotional human, like, and as a teenager just like even more so. My parents, I bless them so much. I don't know how they lived with me for so long. They really were lovely. Um but like I would have these like wicked fights, like just high strung emotion teenager, these fights, and then I'd be silent and like just steaming, driving to the studio with, whoever was driving me that night, and walk in, and you're just, and this happens in everything, whether you're like going to work, like you're like, you've got that, you've got all those feelings that it's like sitting right in your torso, and you're just like, and you want to just like latch onto it, and just because for some reason, like drilling down on it will feel better. It doesn't. So, but then like I vividly remember I would go to dance and I'd be so mad, I'd be so pissed, and I just wanted to live in that anger. And then you start the warm up and you start working and you're moving your body, and I start listening to the music and I start focusing on my teacher, and truly, truly, within like 10 or 15 minutes of class, I was like, why was I mad? What was I mad? Like, and also feeling so stupid, feeling so dumb about getting so angry about something. Um, the thing is, in order for that transformation to happen, you as the person have to buy into the class. You have to actually put your focus. If you don't and you sit in that space, it doesn't go anywhere. So you do have to buy in, and it'll feel horrible, and you can be like, you can huff and puff and like make the faces like me when I'm working out, like my poor trainer, like Cece. She's like, we're gonna do this. I'm like, no, no, like just growl, and I'm like, I'm gonna do it. Um, but yeah, you have to buy in, and then it does move away, like it does melt away, and that was really, I didn't recognize how much I needed that as a teenager, and it really helped like focus and move through those emotions big time.
Yeah, I think it's like something to do with, I suppose, channeling your energy somewhere else instead of continuously thinking
Yes.
about whatever it is you're pissed or
Uh-huh.
sad about. It's getting out of your head and into your body, and then
Yeah.
sort of like using the body almost to process it without
Yeah.
needing to continuously think about it. 'Cause I think we can kind
Yeah.
of go into a cycle of picking at the scab and just like
Oh, that's such a
continuously
good
thinking about
analogy.
something, and like it just gets worse and worse and worse. I think when you do any kind of movement, but I think dance is incredible. I even just throwing on a song and like shaking somehow,
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
out of your head and into your body and starting to feel your body again really
Yeah.
does help it just kind of disappear somehow. I
Yeah. I yeah. I like to have like a solid playlist of like bangers where if I'm in a shit mood, I can throw them on, and I can't help but either like sing, bop along, like whatever, and it varies like depending on the season and like where I'm at in my life. I mean, I will say September by Earth, Wind and Fire is always up there, like probably like number one. I truly can't continue in a bad mood if I listen to that. Um, but as I like when I was really working through therapy, understanding the chemical imbalance of those like emotions and like the anxiety and depression, that movement literally burns off those stressors. Like it's actually, because we're like, oh, it just melts away. I'm like, no, no, no. We're creating like all these chemical reactions that's actually moving. We are physically moving that out of our body. And that's why you feel better. And I love that I know that now on like more of a scientific level, as opposed to just like, I feel good when I move my body. I'm like, yes, absolutely true. And also this, because it gets rid of the things we have too much of, maybe, and then builds up the things that we need more of. Yeah.
That's really good to know, I think. That it does like there it's not just a feeling, there is actually
Yeah.
evidence to it because I think
Yeah.
it's something people can anchor to that
Yes.
when I feel shit, it's not just because there's some woo woo person telling you to shake and some like somatic dance or something. There's actual science behind
Yes.
it. So there is
Yeah.
kind of a woo thing and a scientific thing. So
Yeah.
it's double validation that you should get up and
Totally.
dance.
Yes. The double validation is nice. And I'm always moving towards more of, you felt this, you feel like you know it to be true. And then also, isn't it nice that there's this proof? And also that this proof is also like seeing and tying into the woo, like it's slow, but it's starting to come together, and it's really nice.
Yeah, but I
It's
think
really
that's
nice.
kind of totally off topic, but loads of areas, the kind of old school, like new agey woo things are actually starting to get really scientifically backed in many different
Yeah.
areas, which is good because it kind of makes us that just had an intuitive nudge that something feels good, like
Yes.
dancing when you feel shit, it does kind of make you feel a bit less weird. It's like, oh no, there is actually like
Yeah.
I can trust my intuitions there, because there is
Yeah. Yeah.
scientific validation, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Well, that adrenaline needs to be burned off, or I will not be able to go to bed. Like, if
Yeah.
you have a ruminating mind and you can't sleep and you're just like, I'm like, go do some push-ups. Like, I have gotten out of bed at like 1:30 in the morning and I'm just like, I guess I'm doing a wall sit and then like as many push-ups as I can. And then like I'll just be on the floor doing dead bugs. And my poor husband's like, okay, anxiety wife, right? You deal with it. But uh, it sounds so dumb and it feels, I remember my therapist saying, she's like, I know when you're feeling the most anxious and the worst, and like you feel like you're gonna like whatever. She's like, I know you don't feel like working out, run up and down the stairs. And I was like, all right. And it's, yeah, it's true.
It's definitely true, and I think it's definitely like a real key to a creative process. I
Hmm.
think a lot of the creative community have got into this space where like, oh, in the morning we need to do these rituals where we have an ice bath or like go to the gym or do whatever. And again, those are all shoulds. Follow whatever feels right for your body. But you
Hmm.
forget that like throughout the day, if you're starting to feel those thoughts come in again, if you're starting to feel anxious, if you're starting to feel self-doubt, there's nothing stopping you from moving for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It will really be night and day in the way that you're feeling and the way that you're
Hmm.
creating. I think that's really powerful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's available to you at all times. And that is, I think, that's something that's so nice about having a creative life is like, and I think why you don't want to paint everyone with the same brush at all. But one of the reasons why I think we're drawn to a creative life is because of that sort of like flexibility, and there's no rigidity in terms of like, you know, this, but also not letting our own rules or guidelines or rituals that we make up for ourselves to remember that like, oh, the whole reason we wanted this freedom and creativity was so we could do what we want. So when you feel that 4 p.m. slump, do shake it up, like literally. Like that's why we have that like freedom within the like world and life that we created. So don't let that box you in too much.
Absolutely. I think that's a great kind of way to leave everyone with, and a reminder for everyone to leave with, that when you chase this life, you're creating a life of freedom for yourself.
Yeah.
So why are you trying to then create more rigidity in your life? I think sometimes
Yeah.
it's because we feel guilty because like we've
Oh, big
somehow
time.
created a sort of loophole to living. Like we don't have to do the 9 to 5. We don't have to do the grey suit. We don't have to like follow
Uh-huh.
this sort of hustle culture that everyone else is. We are actually supposed to create our own rules
Yeah.
and like
But
permit
don't
yourself
let
that.
those rules confine you. Don't
Yeah,
substitute the world's rules for your rules. It will just become the same thing and you won't enjoy it. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And move your body when you can.
Yeah. Shake what your mama gave you. Have a kitchen dance party. There's nothing more fun than a kitchen dance party or like scream singing in your car with like the if you have a roof open. That's like those are like really high up on the things that I try to do like on a weekly basis.
Incredible. And I think that's a great reminder to leave everyone with, guys. Maybe play that bit twice. Thank you so much, Lesie, for joining me today. It's been such an incredible time to meet you and hear your wisdom and hear about your
Thank
story. I
you.
think there's loads of takeaways people can use no matter what your creative path is.
Yeah.
Um, for sure. So thanks so much for coming
Okay.
on.
Thank you so much, Ellie. This was so wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Maverick Mind. I hope that you've loved it, and if you have, I would appreciate it so much if you would subscribe and write a 5-star review on wherever you're listening to this podcast from. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, I invite you to join me over on Instagram at maverickmindco or on my website maverickmind.elliefoden.com. And I'll see you in another podcast very, very soon.